It was just another Monday morning in the busy downtown office. People rushed through the lobby with their coffee cups, checking their phones, complaining about traffic. The elevator was packed as usual. Everyone was in their own world, preparing for another week of meetings and deadlines. Maya Chen had worked at this company for 8 long years. 8 years of showing up early, staying late, and giving everything she had. She was the kind of person who never made a fuss. She did her work quietly, efficiently, and always with a smile. Her coworkers liked her well enough, but if you asked them to describe her, they'd probably say she was nice, professional, maybe a bit too quiet. But this Monday was different. The weekly team meeting started at 9 o'clock sharp like it always did. Everyone filed into the conference room with their laptops and notebooks. Richard, the department head, was already there, setting up his presentation. He was the type who loved the sound of his own voice, always ready with a long speech about strategy and vision. By 9:15, everyone was seated and Richard had already launched into his update about last week's numbers. That's when the door opened. Maya walked in. Now, walking into a meeting 15 minutes late might not sound like a big deal to you. People are late all the time, right? They blame traffic or a family emergency or a meeting that ran over. They apologize quickly, slip into their seat, and try not to draw attention. But Maya never did that. In 8 years, she'd never been late to a meeting, not once. She was always the first one there, actually, with her notes organized and her coffee already half finished. So when she walked in at 9:15, everyone noticed. Richard stopped mid-sentence. He looked at her with that expression managers get when someone breaks an unspoken rule. His eyebrows went up slightly, waiting for the apology, the explanation, the uncomfortable excuse. It never came. Maya didn't say a word. She didn't mouth sorry, or make that apologetic face people make when they're late. She simply walked to the empty chair at the far end of the table and sat down. She placed her notebook in front of her, clicked her pen, and looked up at Richard as if to say, "Continue." The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt longer. Everyone in the room could feel something was off. It was like when you sense a storm coming even before you see the clouds. Richard cleared his throat and went back to his presentation, but you could tell he was thrown off. He kept glancing at Maya, but she wasn't giving him anything. No smile, no nod, no engagement. She just sat there, perfectly calm, perfectly still. Her closest friend in the office, James, was sitting 2 chairs away. He'd worked with Maya for 5 years and they'd become genuine friends. They'd grab lunch together, complain about work stuff, share funny videos during boring afternoons. He knew her pretty well, or at least he thought he did. He pulled out his phone and typed quickly under the table. "You okay?" He watched Maya's phone light up on the table next to her notebook. She glanced at it, read the message, then placed the phone face down without responding. That's when James knew something was seriously wrong. The meeting continued, but the energy had shifted. Richard was talking about the quarterly marketing campaign, showing slides with graphs and statistics. Normally, this was where Maya would shine. She'd point out details others missed, suggest improvements, ask smart questions that made everyone think harder. Not today. When Richard directly asked her opinion about the social media strategy, she gave a 1-sentence answer. "It looks fine." That was it. No elaboration, no ideas, no enthusiasm. Richard tried again. "Maya, you worked on the analysis for this. What do you think about the budget allocation?" "It's within the approved parameters," she said. Her voice was polite but flat, like she was reading from a script. The other team members exchanged glances. Something was definitely wrong, but nobody wanted to address it directly. In office culture, you don't usually call out weird behavior in front of everyone. You wait until after, in the hallway or the break room, and then everyone whispers about it. The meeting dragged on for another 30 minutes. Richard covered all his bullet points, assigned some tasks, reminded everyone about deadlines. The whole time Maya sat there with perfect posture, taking minimal notes, her face completely neutral, but her eyes told a different story. If you looked closely, really looked, you could see something burning there. Not anger exactly, though there was some of that. Not sadness, though that was there too. It was more like determination, like someone who had made a decision and was done second-guessing it. When the meeting finally ended, everyone started gathering their things and heading back to their desks. Maya stood up, closed her notebook, and walked out without talking to anyone. No small talk by the coffee machine, no "how was your weekend" chatter in the hallway. James tried to catch up with her. "Hey Maya, wait up." She turned, and for a moment her expression softened just slightly. "Hey, want to grab coffee real quick? Just 5 minutes?" She shook her head. "I've got a lot to catch up on. Maybe later." But they both knew maybe later meant no. Back at her desk, Maya opened her laptop and got straight to work. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the same efficiency they always had. She answered emails, updated spreadsheets, reviewed documents. To anyone watching, she looked completely normal. But people were watching. You know how offices are. When someone acts differently, especially someone who's usually so predictable, it becomes the day's entertainment. By lunch, the whispers had started. "Did you see Maya in the meeting? She seems off, right? Maybe she's having personal problems. Maybe she's quitting." Nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew that Maya had spent the entire weekend awake, staring at her computer screen, reading through an email chain she was never supposed to see. Nobody knew that she'd discovered something that changed everything. Nobody knew that she'd spent Sunday night going through 8 years of work files, documenting every project, every idea, every contribution that had been overlooked or taken by someone else. All they knew was that Maya Chen, the quiet, reliable, always pleasant team member, had walked into that meeting with different eyes, eyes that had finally seen the truth, eyes that were done pretending everything was fine, and sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. One person deciding they're done accepting less than they deserve. One person walking into a room quietly but with eyes that say, "No more." Maya didn't yell. She didn't slam doors or send angry emails. She didn't do anything dramatic. She just stopped giving more than she was getting. She stopped being invisible. And in a workplace where she'd been taken for granted for so long, that quiet change was louder than any words could ever be. The rest of Monday passed in a strange haze. Maya worked steadily through her task list, but something fundamental had shifted inside her. It was like she'd been watching a movie of her own life for years, and suddenly, she'd woken up and realized she was actually in it. Let's go back to Sunday night, because that's when everything changed. Maya had been relaxing at home, scrolling through her personal email, when a notification popped up. It was from the company email system. Something about being added to a thread. She clicked it without thinking much about it. The email chain was long. It was a conversation between Richard, her supervisor, and 2 executives from upper management. The subject line read, "Q4 Strategy Proposal Review." As Maya scrolled through the messages, her stomach started to sink. There, in Richard's email, was her idea. The entire campaign strategy she'd spent 3 weeks developing, complete with market research, creative concepts, and budget projections. She'd presented it to Richard 2 months ago in a one-on-one meeting. He'd said he wanted to review it further before sharing it with leadership, but in this email chain, Richard had presented the whole thing as his own work. He didn't mention her name once. When the executives praised the innovative approach, Richard thanked them and talked about how he'd developed this strategy by analyzing market trends. Maya read the email 3 times, hoping she was misunderstanding. She wasn't. She got up from her couch and started pacing. Her hands were shaking. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, she realized. It was just the first time she'd seen it so clearly, in writing, undeniable. She went to her home office and opened her laptop. Then she did something she'd never done before. She started going through everything. Every project from the past 8 years. Every presentation, every campaign, every strategy document. The more she looked, the more she found. Her fingerprints were everywhere, but her name was nowhere. There was the client pitch from 3 years ago that won a major account. She'd written 90% of it, but Richard had presented it. He'd gotten a bonus. She'd gotten a thank you email. There was the social media campaign from last year that went viral and brought in record engagement. She'd created the concept, written the content, managed the rollout. But in the company newsletter, it was credited to the marketing team under Richard's leadership. There was the crisis management strategy from 2 years back when a product launch went wrong. She'd worked 16-hour days for a week straight to fix it. The CEO had personally thanked Richard for his quick thinking and decisive action. By 3 in the morning, Maya had compiled a list of 27 major projects. 27 times her work had been absorbed into someone else's success story. She'd never said anything. Not once, because that's what she'd been taught, wasn't it? Keep your head down. Be a team player. Don't rock the boat. Your work will speak for itself. Except it hadn't. Her work had spoken for Richard's career advancement while hers stayed exactly where it was. Maya didn't sleep that night. By sunrise, she'd created a detailed document with dates, project descriptions, and evidence of her contributions. She didn't know what she was going to do with it yet, but she knew she was done pretending it didn't matter. Now back to Monday afternoon. At exactly 5 o'clock, Maya saved her work, shut down her computer, and stood up. She put on her coat, picked up her bag, and walked toward the elevator. This might not sound unusual, but it was. Maya typically stayed until 6:30 or 7, sometimes later. There was always one more thing to finish, one more email to send, one more problem to solve. But not anymore. As she waited for the elevator, she could feel eyes on her. People noticed. In an office where staying late was worn like a badge of honor, leaving on time was almost rebellious. Tuesday was more of the same. Maya arrived exactly at 9, not at 8:30 like usual. She worked through her assigned tasks with the same quality and precision she always had. But when people asked her to just quickly help with something that wasn't her responsibility, she politely declined. "I'm focused on my current projects right now," she'd say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. By Wednesday, people were definitely talking. The break room conversations would stop when she walked in. She could see the confused looks, the whispered discussions. James finally cornered her in the parking lot Wednesday afternoon. He'd been her friend too long to let this go. "Okay, what's going on?" he asked directly. "And don't say nothing because we both know something's up." Maya looked at him for a long moment. James was a good guy. He'd always been supportive, always been kind. But he was also comfortable. He didn't see what she saw because it wasn't happening to him. "I'm just doing my job," she said. "Nothing more, nothing less." "But that's not you," James insisted. "You love this work. You always go above and beyond." "Maybe I'm tired of going above and beyond for people who don't notice." James didn't know what to say to that. He could see the hurt in her eyes, but he didn't understand where it was coming from. How could he? He'd never been invisible. Wednesday afternoon, Richard called Maya into his office. She'd been expecting this. She sat down across from his big desk with its leather chair and his walls covered in awards and certificates. She wondered how many of those achievements had her work behind them. "Maya, I wanted to check in with you," Richard started, using that concerned manager voice that never sounds quite genuine. "I've noticed you've seemed a bit disconnected this week. Have I?" She kept her face neutral. "You've been leaving right at 5. You're not participating in meetings like you usually do. Is everything all right at home?" There it was. The assumption that if a woman isn't performing like usual, it must be personal problems, not work problems. "Never that. Everything's fine," Maya said calmly. "I'm completing all my assigned work on time and meeting all my deadlines." "Is there a problem with my performance?" Richard shifted in his chair. No problem with your work quality. It's just, you seem different." "Different how?" He struggled to articulate it. "How do you tell someone they're not being helpful enough, when being helpful isn't actually their job? How do you say you're upset they're not going above and beyond when going above and beyond is voluntary?" "Just different," he finally said. "I want to make sure you're happy here. You're a valuable member of the team." Maya almost laughed at that. Valuable. After 8 years of being overlooked for promotions while watching less experienced people advance. After countless times her ideas were used without credit. After being invited to meetings only when there was grunt work to be done but excluded from the strategy sessions where decisions were made. But she didn't say any of that. "Not yet. I appreciate your concern," she said. "I'm just focusing on doing my job well. Isn't that what you want?" Richard couldn't argue with that. He dismissed her with a puzzled look, probably planning to complain to HR about her attitude problem. That evening, Maya did something she hadn't done in months. She updated her resume. She looked at her LinkedIn profile and realized it barely reflected everything she'd accomplished. So she started updating that too. Then she reached out to 3 former colleagues who'd left the company, people who'd moved on to better opportunities, people who might have leads. The responses came quickly. All 3 said the same thing. "I've been wondering when you'd reach out. "You're way too talented to stay there." Maya smiled. Maybe they'd seen something she'd been too close to see. Maybe everyone knew she was undervalued except her. She was beginning to understand something important. Being quiet and patient and hoping someone would notice your worth only works if people are actually looking. And they weren't looking at her. They were looking right through her, seeing only what they needed in the moment and forgetting her as soon as she wasn't useful. Well, she was done waiting to be seen. She was going to make sure she couldn't be ignored. By Thursday morning, Maya's new approach was creating problems. Not because she was doing anything wrong. That was the interesting part. She was doing everything exactly right by the book, following her job description to the letter. And that's when everyone realized how much they'd been depending on her to do more than her job. It started with small things. The printer on the second floor ran out of paper. Usually Maya would notice and refill it, even though building services was supposed to handle that. Now, the printer stayed empty until someone finally called maintenance 3 hours later. A client sent an email late Wednesday night asking for clarification on a project. Normally, Maya would see it first thing in the morning and handle it before anyone else even knew there was a question. Now, she wasn't checking emails before 9. The client waited and waited. And by the time someone else saw it at 10:30, the client was irritated. Richard's presentation for Friday afternoon needed data analysis. He'd gotten used to sending Maya rough information and having her turn it into clear, compelling slides. But when he sent her the data Thursday morning with his usual vague instructions, she sent back a simple question. Is this an assigned task or a request for additional support? He stared at the email for a full minute. Was it assigned? Technically, no. It was just something she'd always done because she was helpful and he'd come to expect it. He ended up spending 4 hours doing work he'd forgotten how to do because Maya had been doing it for so long. The marketing team had a deadline for Friday. They'd built their timeline assuming Maya would jump in and help with the final push like she always did. Thursday afternoon, when they started panicking about not finishing on time, they went to Maya's desk. "Hey, we're really stressed about tomorrow's deadline," one of them said. "Could you help us proof the materials and check the data?" Maya looked up from her screen. "What's the project?" "The Henderson campaign launch." "I'm not assigned to Henderson," Maya said simply. "Have you talked to Richard about getting additional resources?" "Well, yeah, but we thought—" "You usually help when things get tight." "I'm focusing on my assigned projects right now," Maya said, not mean, not angry, just firm. "I hope you get it sorted out." The team member walked away frustrated, complaining to others that Maya was being difficult. But was she? Or had they just gotten used to her making their problems her problems? By Friday afternoon, the cracks were really showing. The Henderson team had to request a deadline extension. Richard's presentation went okay, but not great, and the executives noticed the quality wasn't up to the usual standard. 3 different people had small fires they couldn't put out because the person who usually noticed and fixed things wasn't doing that anymore. And through it all, Maya worked calmly at her desk. Her actual assigned projects were perfect. Her deliverables were on time. Her work quality was flawless. She just wasn't being everyone's backup plan anymore. Friday evening, as Maya was packing up at exactly 5 o'clock, James finally understood what was happening. "You're not having personal problems," he said quietly, standing by her desk. "You're making a point." Maya looked at him. "I'm just doing my job, James. But you used to do everyone's job." "I know," she said. "And where did that get me?" James didn't have an answer. That weekend was different for Maya. She didn't think about work once. She went to a bookstore on Saturday afternoon, something she used to love but hadn't done in years. She bought 3 novels and a journal. She sat in the bookstore cafe for 2 hours just reading. That's when she met David. He was sitting at the next table, also reading. When he got up to get more coffee, he accidentally bumped her table. "Sorry about that," he said with a genuine smile. "No problem." He noticed her book. "That's a good one. Have you gotten to the part where she figures out who she really is?" They ended up talking for an hour. David was easy to talk to. He listened when she spoke. He asked thoughtful questions. He didn't interrupt or try to fix things or dismiss her thoughts. He told her he worked as a project manager at a tech startup downtown. She told him she was in marketing, and when he asked about her job, she found herself being honest in a way she hadn't been with anyone. I think I've been invisible for a long time, she said, and I'm just now realizing it. I get that, David said. I left my last company for the same reason. I was giving everything and getting nothing back. Leaving was the best decision I ever made. Were you scared? Maya asked. Terrified, he admitted. But you know what was scarier? The thought of spending another 5 years somewhere that didn't value me. They exchanged numbers before leaving. Maya walked home feeling lighter than she had in months. Talking to David had reminded her that there was a whole world outside her office. There were places where people's contributions were recognized, where you didn't have to fight to be seen. On Monday morning, Maya walked into the office with renewed clarity. She'd spent the weekend thinking about what she really wanted, and what she didn't want was to spend another year being taken for granted. She'd also done something else over the weekend. She'd applied to 3 positions at other companies. Real positions with clear advancement paths and better pay. 2 had already contacted her back to schedule interviews. That Monday, the atmosphere in the office was tense. Richard had been called into a meeting with the CEO about last week's problems. The Henderson deadline extension had made the company look bad to a major client. The presentation that fell short had raised questions about team capability. People were starting to connect the dots. All these problems started happening the same week Maya stopped going above and beyond. At lunch, Maya sat alone in the cafeteria, preferring her own company to the awkward conversations. She watched her coworkers interact, saw the office dynamics she'd been part of for so long from a new perspective. It was like she'd been performing in a play and suddenly stepped off stage to watch from the audience. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a text from David. "How's your Monday going?" She smiled and typed back, "Different. In a good way. Want to grab dinner this week? I'd love to hear more about your Invisible Woman experience." She laughed at that. Leave it to someone she'd just met to understand better than people she'd worked with for years. "I'd like that," she replied. As she put her phone away, Maya noticed Richard watching her from his office window. He looked stressed. Good. Maybe stress would make him think about how much he'd relied on someone he'd never properly recognized. The following weeks would be interesting. Maya knew that. She'd disrupted the ecosystem. People were uncomfortable. Change always made people uncomfortable. But for the first time in 8 years, Maya felt like she was living for herself instead of for everyone else's convenience. And that feeling? That was worth all the awkward meetings and uncomfortable conversations ahead. 2 weeks after Maya's quiet revolution began, things came to a head in a way nobody expected. It started with an email. On a Tuesday morning, Maya received a meeting invitation from Richard. Subject line: Performance discussion. Attendees: Richard, Maya, and someone from Human Resources named Patricia. Maya stared at the invitation. She knew what this meant. When HR gets involved, it's serious. They were going to try to intimidate her back into being the person who did everyone's work without complaint. She accepted the meeting. Then she went home that evening and spent 3 hours organizing her documentation. Every project, every email, every piece of evidence she'd been collecting. She created a folder with it all, backed it up in 3 places, and prepared herself for what was coming. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 o'clock. When Thursday arrived, Maya dressed carefully. Professional, confident, ready. She brought a single folder with her to the meeting. Nothing else. No laptop, no notebook, just that folder. She walked into Richard's office at exactly 2. Patricia from HR was already there, sitting with a tablet and that neutral expression HR people always have. The kind that says, "I'm here to be fair," but really means, "I'm here to protect the company." Richard gestured to a chair. "Thanks for meeting with us, Maya." "Of course." Patricia started with the standard HR introduction. "Maya, we wanted to have a conversation about some concerns regarding your recent performance and engagement level." "My performance?" Maya kept her voice level. "Has the quality of my work declined?" "Not the quality, no," Richard jumped in. "But there's been a noticeable change in your attitude and team participation." "Can you be specific about what you mean by attitude?" Richard shifted in his chair. He'd clearly expected Maya to be defensive or nervous. Instead, she was calm, asking direct questions. "You've been leaving at 5 o'clock every day," he said. "My work hours are 9 to 5, Maya responded. Is there a problem with me working my scheduled hours? Well, no, but you used to stay later to help the team. Help with tasks that weren't part of my job description? Patricia made a note on her tablet. Maya could see this wasn't going the way Richard had planned. You've also stopped volunteering for additional projects, Richard continued. And in meetings, you're not contributing ideas like you used to. I respond when asked direct questions about my assigned work, Maya said. Are you saying I'm required to volunteer for work beyond my responsibilities? Another note from Patricia. Richard was getting frustrated now. Maya, this isn't about rules and requirements. It's about being a team player, and there it was. The phrase that had kept Maya in place for 8 years. Team player. That magic phrase managers use when they want you to do more for the same pay, sacrifice more for the same recognition, give more while getting less. I see, Maya said quietly. Then she opened her folder. I'd like to share some information with you both. She pulled out the first document. It was a timeline of every major project she'd worked on in the past 3 years. Each one listed her contributions, the hours she'd spent, and the outcomes. These are projects I led or made significant contributions to, she said, sliding copies across the desk to Richard and Patricia. You'll notice that in most cases my name doesn't appear in the final presentations or company communications about these successes. Richard's face was starting to redden. Maya pulled out another document. This is the email chain from 6 weeks ago where my Q4 strategy proposal was presented to senior leadership as Richard's original work. Patricia leaned forward, reading more carefully now. Here's a comparison of my performance reviews over the past 5 years, and the promotions given during that time period. You'll see I've consistently received excellent ratings, yet I've been passed over for advancement 7 times, while less experienced colleagues were promoted. Document after document, Maya laid it all out. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't get emotional. She just presented facts, evidence, timeline, 8 years of being overlooked, compiled into an undeniable record. Here's my job description, she continued. And here's a typical week of my actual work. You'll notice I've been performing tasks well beyond my role and pay grade for years. Richard tried to interrupt. Maya, if you felt overlooked, you should have said something. She looked at him directly. I did. Multiple times. I asked about advancement opportunities. I mentioned my contributions in our one-on-ones. I requested to be included in strategic planning meetings. Do you remember what you told me? He didn't answer. You said to be patient, to keep doing good work, that my time would come, that I needed to prove myself a little more. She paused. How much more proof did you need than 8 years of excellent performance? The room was silent. Patricia was no longer pretending to be neutral. She was reading through the documents with increasing attention, and her expression had shifted from bureaucratic distance to uncomfortable recognition. Maya pulled out one final document. This is a detailed account of projects where my work was credited to others. Ideas I suggested in meetings that were later implemented without acknowledgement, and times I was excluded from opportunities despite being the most qualified person on the team. She laid it on top of the pile. So when you say my attitude has changed, you're right. I've stopped accepting less than I deserve. I've stopped doing extra work without recognition or compensation. I've stopped making other people look good at the expense of my own career. She sat back in her chair. If that makes me a bad team player, then I guess I'm a bad team player. But I'm a team player who's been carrying this team for years while being treated as invisible. Richard was speechless. Patricia was still reading, making notes, her expression serious. Maya stood up. Unless there's something else, I have work to finish. Patricia looked up. Maya, we'll need to review all of this carefully. This meeting is concluded for now, but we'll be in touch. Maya nodded and walked out, leaving the folder of documents on Richard's desk. As she walked back to her desk, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Power. Not over anyone else, but over her own story. She'd spoken her truth. She'd shown her evidence. And whatever happened next, at least she'd stopped being silent. That evening, David texted asking how her day went. She told him about the meeting. Wow, he replied. That took guts. How do you feel? Maya thought about it. Free, she typed back. I feel free. They made plans for dinner that weekend. Maya found herself looking forward to it, looking forward to spending time with someone who saw her from the beginning, who didn't have 8 years of taking her for granted to overcome. The next morning, the atmosphere in the office was strange. Word had spread somehow that Maya had a meeting with HR and Richard. People were being extra careful around her. Some looked at her with new respect. Others avoided her eyes. James stopped by her desk. I heard yesterday got intense. It was honest, Maya said. Good for you, he said quietly. Seriously, someone needed to say something. Over the next few days, Maya noticed changes. HR had clearly started an investigation. Patricia had meetings with several team members. Richard was uncharacteristically quiet, avoiding Maya entirely. Maya continued working exactly as she had been. Quality work within her job description. Professional, courteous, but no longer sacrificing herself for others' success. On the following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the meeting, Patricia called Maya. Can you come to my office? When Maya arrived, Patricia got straight to the point. We've completed our review of the situation. I want you to know that we take your concerns seriously. We've documented several instances where proper attribution was not given and where your contributions were not adequately recognized. Maya waited. Richard will be receiving a formal reprimand and will be required to complete management training focused on team leadership and employee recognition. Additionally, we're implementing new protocols for project attribution and employee evaluation. I appreciate that, Maya said. There's more, Patricia continued. The promotion you were passed over for last quarter? We're offering it to you now, along with a salary adjustment and formal recognition of your past contributions. Maya looked at Patricia for a long moment. This was it, the moment she'd wanted for years. Recognition, advancement, validation that her work mattered. So why didn't she feel excited? Can I have some time to think about it? Maya asked. Patricia looked surprised. Of course, take a few days. Maya walked out of HR feeling strange. She should be happy, right? She'd won. The company had admitted they were wrong. They were offering her what she deserved. But something had shifted inside her during these past weeks. She'd discovered something important. She didn't just want to be recognized at this company. She wanted to be somewhere that had valued her from the start, somewhere she didn't have to fight to be seen. That weekend at dinner with David, she talked through her feelings. They offered you the promotion? He asked. And an apology, essentially. Recognition of everything I claimed. But you're not sure you want it. Is that crazy? Maya asked. I fought for this. I documented everything. I put myself out there. And now that I've won, I'm not sure I want the prize. David smiled. It's not crazy. Sometimes winning means walking away. You proved your point. You got them to admit they were wrong, but that doesn't mean you have to stay somewhere that only valued you after you forced.